We're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to come in before we get started. All right, I still see some people entering, so I'll give it another little bit here to let everybody in. All right, well, I think I'll go ahead and get started. If some people come in a little bit late, that'll be fine. I want to welcome everybody. I'm going to talk about how to do an effective presentation to what's typically a non-technical audience. And this is something that I'm presuming every single person who would potentially attend this conference would need to know how to do. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time over my career honing my skills on through the roles that I had. So just to kind of get things started, I'm going to take you through 3 sections from my book, Winning the Room. There's the planning section in terms of what do you have to do as you're laying out a presentation, getting ready to have to develop it? What do you have to take into account when you're actually doing the development, creating the slides, creating the content? And then the delivery, getting your final preparations done and actually delivering it. Now, with 20 minutes, I'm going to go through this just with a couple of examples, fairly rapid fire. And you'll notice that the tip numbers go in order, but they're not sequential. Obviously, I've cut out a whole lot of tips due to the time. One quick caveat and level set is that this is about a live presentation. So this is not about data visualization per se. You know, it's not about directly storytelling, although it's part of it. This is about getting in front of a live room, whether it's a conference room of executives, whether it's a conference in a live venue, or even on a webinar where there's people that you have to influence and somehow get to take action on your results. And as a result, I'm using some very simple examples in this. First, I'm trying to make the illustrations of specific points very easy to see. And second, 90% of the graphs that get done in the real world are still PowerPoint and Excel basic charts and graphs. We could all hate that fact, but it's true. So I'm trying to make things seem as familiar to as many people as possible. So some of the graphics are going to be fairly simplistic. But the first step whenever you're doing a live presentation is making sure you have some basic fundamental things in place in your head and in your planning. Because if you don't get your strategy right, you're not going to have anything else from there go correct. Your goal in any live presentation is to get an audience who's often far, far less technical than you to understand what you found, grasp the implications of that information, and then most specifically take action upon it. Obviously, there's no point in doing an amazing project and finding some amazing results if nothing happens. So one of the things that I think I came to terms with over the years, and it took me a while, and it still sounds crazy to say, but results are not really the biggest factor in success if you go out and do a large data science or other technical project. In an ideal world, it would be. All that should matter are the results. But I'm going to suggest to you that at most 50% is what you actually find in terms of having accurate and firm, solid results. At least 50% is in how those results get presented, how they get received, how you get someone to actually take that action. So as I mentioned, we'd wish it would all be about the facts and figures, but a non-technical audience, if you throw all these facts and figures in front of them and you don't put it in context, you don't put it in their language, they're going to get confused, they're going to get frustrated, and nothing will actually happen. So how you deliver your message and how well you communicate those results is at least as important as those results. Now, don't mistake me for saying results aren't important. They're necessary, they're just not sufficient. I would never suggest you have anything except accurate, solid results. It's just that you're only halfway done. Unfortunately, after months of time getting accurate, solid results, I see many people shortchange and only leave themselves a few hours or maybe a day or so to put together the presentation to represent all of that work. So if I can leave you with one key thing is that you are there to tell a story, not to write a story. It's a live presentation. We've all seen charts like this. And when I put this up, not only does it look horrible, but even as I'm going to tell you right now, don't read this. It doesn't have anything that you actually need to hear right now. You're probably, many of you listening, going to have trouble not reading it. I find when anyone puts something up on a slide in a room, I cannot help but read it, even when I know that I should not. But the point is, people often attempt to put everything on slides that they need to get across. And they might need to get across the information on that slide, but you're there to tell the story and talk about those findings, not write them down. That's what a written report's for. So in this case, if you notice, each of these 4 orange boxes has an action item on the top. Let's simplify this down to one simple slide, I'll talk to this. I'll say, you know what, we've got 4 different actions. We're going to alert leadership. I'm going to talk through those points, develop a plan. In fact, we could even go one better to keep people focused by using animations. Our first point is alerting leadership. I talk it through. I build out the next point and talk about developing the plan and so forth. This keeps everyone's attention squarely on you as the speaker, and you can talk for as long or as little as you need to for any given point, but your slides themselves should be very brief. So let's say you got yourself grounded in the fundamentals, and now it's time to design your presentation. You've got to actually lay out and think through what you're going to do. And when I say design your presentation, I mean that quite literally, designing it. The worst thing you can do is just starting grabbing data and then starting to make slides. You want to lay it out, you want to think it through, you want to decide, what do you want to tell the audience? In what order do you want to tell them? How much detail? What are the takeaways and actions that you want them to do? Think about when people make movies. Someone making a movie doesn't just start shooting random scenes and hope that they'll come out on the back end with things they can paste together into a movie. They have absolutely detailed every movement and every word within each of the scenes that they film before putting them together. You need to do the same with your presentation. So one thing is to focus on how to use your results, not how you computed the results, how you found the results. The technical challenge isn't getting to the results. Focus on it for that non-technical audience on how they can make use of it. So imagine you go into a car dealership and there's a backup camera, and maybe you haven't seen one before, you're not familiar with how this one works. So you ask the car salesperson, hey, how does this backup camera work? Well, if they're going to do what a lot of data scientists do, this is a person who's really into cars, really into the technology, and they're going to launch into something. Oh, so glad you asked. This is a 1080p high def LCD screen. It's connected via an HDMI cable to an onboard GPU processor that's grabbing live video from our 4K cameras embedded in the back bumper, et cetera, et cetera. It talks about the vectors getting rendered and so forth. And you're sitting there saying, what in the heck is that about? I really don't care about that detail. As a data scientist, most of your audience doesn't care about all the gory details behind your models. What you probably wanted to hear when you said, how does it work? What you really mean is, how do I use it? You probably wanted that salesperson to say, oh, this is great. When you put the car in reverse, it's going to show you what's behind you and the direction that you're going. If you hear a beep, stop. It's how do you simply use all of that technology? You don't care about the technology. In a data science context, if a business sponsor goes, well, how do I use this response model, or how does this response model work? They specifically are never going to be actually wanting to know how a response model works, how the parameters are computed, how the algorithm's optimized, et cetera. What they probably want to know is something very simple. The easy thing about this algorithm is that we're going to be able to give every single customer a probability of response. You tell us how many you'd like to contact, and we can give you that list. Done. Keep it very simple. Now, back to not writing too much and focusing on saying, you can create a distinct leave behind document, particularly for a very important presentation. If you've spent months on something, you might want to have literally a paper of some sort along with your presentation. If it's not a major effort, it may not be worth it, but this is where the notes section in PowerPoint can be so amazingly useful. This is a printout, a screenshot of a printout of the notes section. At the top, as you can see, is the slide that I would have actually shown and talked to. But then in the notes section, I can have additional notes, additional talking points, a little bit of narrative, and I can do a printout as the leave behind that has all of that. So this serves 2 purposes. When someone's reviewing the document later, they'll have that extra context so they can, because they probably won't remember everything I said to each chart or graph. Similarly, if they pass it to someone who wasn't in the room, that person will have some chance to at least follow along. And equally important, as you're doing your final preparations to give your presentation, you'll have these notes under there that you can review real quickly to refresh yourself. And a lot of people don't know these are in there, but it's real simple. You can print under File, Print, there's notes pages, and you can just print those out. There's also a notes master to format how your notes look, much like a slide master. So a lot of hidden features there. One of the biggest things you've got to be sure to do is to show the fewest numbers necessary to make a point. This is a common error. Here's a very, quote, simple chart. I have 5 products, 4 quarters with totals and subtotals. 31 numbers on the screen. Notice my headline, organic honey grew by over 50%. You can look at this table you can probably do okay in terms of picking out and seeing exactly what the trend is that I'm talking about, but it's kind of hard. But worse yet is this. Whoever cares about flavored honey is now going to be distracted looking at the peach and blueberry lines and ignoring everything that I say. The executive that's really worried about how Q3 is looking is going to be looking at the Q3 column. Virtually nobody's going to be looking at what I want them to know and what I want them to hear. So the better way to handle this is to extract just the part of that table I'm talking about, the showing that organic honey has grown. No one can misunderstand what I'm talking about here. Now, over a series of slides, I might actually go through every single cell in that original table. That's okay, but I'm doing it one by one by one. At the end, I might even quickly say, oh, and by the way, in the appendix, I have for you a table of all the numbers I just went through in one easy place, and move on. But you don't want them looking at and trying to interpret all those numbers simultaneously while you're speaking live. So after you've designed the presentation, you've got to build it. And wording and text are absolutely critical. If there's one theme around wording and text, it's you want to have as few words and as little text as possible on any given slide so that you can maximize the amount of time that the attention's on you. And so one of the biggest things you can do to help your audience grasp and understand what you found is to use more simplistic layperson terms and definitions. Do not use technical terms. So I see so many times someone will talk about, say, a classic binary model for who's going to buy or not buy or respond or not respond, and they'll put up a table that'll show the correct technical terms of accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. Here's the deal. There's not a single non-technical audience that's going to know what any of these mean. I've been doing this for years. I always get confused as to which one is sensitivity, which one's specificity, because I never use them outside of this context and they sound similar. I could waste a couple of minutes explaining what these mean verbally and lose the audience, and then they'll forget later, or I could keep it really simple and just put the layperson's terms, call it a true positive rate, a true negative rate. That's what they need to know. That's what they're going to understand. Nobody cares or understands those technical terms. Then you get into the numbers and the labels. You similarly have to think through, what do you actually have to show? And here's a common mistake. Analytical packages will spit out numbers to massive levels of detail. Look at this chart. Yummy flavor outsold yucky flavor 5-1. Very simple concept. Do I really need to have $509 million down to the penny and a percent to 1,000th for this? Probably not. At the same time, with this much detail, I don't think anyone believes dollars down to the penny are going to be accurate at this level, and you're just inviting confusion. You can greatly simplify this by putting your units in millions for the dollars and rounding to the nearest percent, because for our point, all we really need people to see is approximately 5-1. They don't need to see that other detail. So this is another way to simplify and make this chart so easy for someone to look at and immediately consume and get the point and turn their attention back to you. So after you've done all this, it's time to now get ready to figure out how you're going to deliver your presentation. You got to figure out exactly what are you going to say. You got to practice a little bit around how you're going to say it. You want to make sure it's all smooth. So an important part of this is literally practicing your presentation. I'll bet that very few of you would develop a paper and submit it as a first draft. If you have an incredibly important email asking for a major budget approval or asking for a promotion or a raise, my guess is most people would draft it, come back and look at it again and do a couple of passes to edit it. Yet I'll even say that the PowerPoint that you're going to present, you probably do multiple passes of. But I routinely see people get up in front of a room to then deliver that PowerPoint presentation, clearly having never actually verbalized their points before. And they're going to get lost. They're going to get confused at points. You want to literally practice. I've spent countless hours over the years when I was flying in somewhere for a presentation. I'm in the hotel room the night before, the morning of. I bring up my presentation. I just walk around that hotel room doing a practice dry run of my entire presentation out loud to myself. By doing that, I'm getting comfortable with it. I'm hearing my own self say it. I invariably find places that I wasn't very smooth. I sometimes find things I need to reorganize. The point is, by doing some practice, you're going to get much more comfortable and much more ready to deliver your material, and you'll be able to address those weak points. One of my biggest pet peeves is you need to focus on time and not slide counts. Everybody has a rule of thumb about how long you're supposed to spend on a given number of minutes. I always say, don't worry about it. You know how much time you have, hit the time. It doesn't matter. I have slides I cover for 10 seconds. I have slides I can cover for 10 minutes. You should similarly not worry about how many slides you have. You should worry that they're going to fit in the time that you have. And if you've done your practice, you'll know that they do. As you do your final dry run as well, you can make sure your numbers are really standing out. Let's say I put up, here's a very simple chart. There's only 4 numbers on it, but what exactly are you supposed to look at? As I talk to it and I practice, I realize, I need to make this a little more obvious. So I can do something where I add a circle that comes in and highlights the number. I could add an arrow. I can come in and, highlight it in big and bold in color. Make it really easy for the audience to focus on exactly what you want them to. And the same thing happens with text. I can have a few bullet points. I would have always animated these one at a time, but let's assume they're here. While I wouldn't do all of these techniques in one slide, you can bold, you can italicize. Notice the green text to highlight something good, or the red text on the bottom talking about the potential lawsuit. There's a lot of options. So after all of this, you're ready to give your presentation. The goal there is you've got to win the trust and confidence of that audience. They have to agree that what you found is important, and they have to take action. So one of the biggest things, and this is one for online, I'm doing online, so I thought I'd bring this up, is you've always got to make your eyes when you're talking look at the camera. This is really awkward. When you're on a Zoom and you're seeing people's thumbnails, the natural tendency is want to look at the people that are talking to you or that you're talking to. And here's the thing, if I come in closer, I'm talking right at the camera right now. In your mind, subconsciously, I'm engaged with you. If I instead looked at one of the pictures down lower of whoever I'm talking to, I, in my brain, feel like I'm totally connecting with you in the audience right now, because I'm looking right at someone's image, for example. But to you, I'm looking down and away, and I'm completely ignoring you. So you have to look at it. This is kind of counterintuitive for me. If you're not supposed to look at things in Zoom, then why do we even use it? And I've actually literally often wondered that myself. So square at the camera. I remind myself of this multiple times, particularly if someone asks me a question, I'll look at them as they ask the question. I remind myself to look back. 2 last thoughts. You always want to tie any facts you present to the end impacts that will drive action. So here's one, obviously this is important, a 10% change in complication rate. But what does that mean? If you don't tie this to the dollars or the efficiencies or some other metric that's going to be judged by the audience, then you risk that A, they either don't do it, or B, maybe they do it and they do it wrong. So take that extra step to do the math, even when it's simple for them, and say, it's not just about complications. Here's how it helps hospitalization, deaths, and most importantly, the cost per complication down 20%. That's going to get people's attention. Compute it, show it, get them excited. Don't leave it to them to do it. And last, often we're delivering a very tactical project, last month's marketing results, for example. And that's great. You've got to do your wrap up, but don't forget that there's often a larger context. So maybe back to my organic honey sales, I have a plan for next quarter based on the results of this quarter. That's a great time to remind the entire audience that not only do we have a good quarter of marketing last quarter, we have another one coming up, but 2 of our 3 strategic goals in the coming 5 years were to grow organic sales as well as direct-to-consumer sales, and these things that we're doing tie into both of those. Now the executives are thinking beyond the great, we made our quarterly number, or this plan's a success, and they're thinking, this is how I get my next promotion, and this is how we get to the company to the next level. And so with that, like I said, I had to go kind of rapid fire. If you have more comments or questions later, you've got my contact info here. Also, if you're interested in hearing from analytics executives through KSU, I've got a webcast I do called Data Science Perspectives. It's on the website. If you go to the School of Data Science on KSU's website, it'll be available on the handout in the click. But I've interviewed now about 60 different analytics executives and their perspectives. So with that, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to pop them into the chat before we drop off. All right, well, with that, I guess we will call it a wrap. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Bill, for your time.